Hovgaard Games is a Danish studio behind the sim games Big Ambitions and startup company. Big Ambitions launched in early access, expecting modest success, but actually found a strong player base. 2 years later, Hovgaard Games has grown to 10 people working remotely, steadily shipping updates every 2 months. Same as most early access games though, they also face the question, how do you decide what's core versus what's post-launch? This isn't about lacking vision. It's about the reality of early access. Every feature request feels valid, every complaint feels urgent, and saying no to engaged players feels risky. I sat down with David, producer and community manager at Hovgaard Games, to understand how they structure production when community feedback threatens scope, how they manage remote workflows, and how they prioritize what really matters. You have a very interesting perspective, like you deal with the production side of things, you deal also with community. So it's like wearing two different hats, but I suppose both of those roles inform production.
Absolutely.
Maybe to get so maybe to get things started, can you give me a bit of like overview of just the general setup first? We'll go into the bits and pieces later, but just like how you guys are structured and then how you balance those two roles.
Absolutely. Well, like you said, they are kind of on two sides of the spectrum. You have the game design and then you have the community. But especially as an early access title, we are still releasing updates. We are still getting that community feedback. So that's definitely part of that loop. And, I think it's incredibly important to balance that because obviously you want the players to be happy. You want them to have the game they like, but you're also trying to maintain the vision that you had for the game. So that puts us in a really, I think the best thing you can have is information. And that's something by communicating with the players and by being very involved with them and how they are playing the game and how they feel about certain tasks that they have to do within the game and how we present that allows us to, it doesn't change the overall direction of the game, but it definitely allows us to say, oh, players are doing it this way. So let's make sure that these features can, complement that sort of thing to increase the player base, but also keep the players that like it engaged. So it's definitely delicate balance where you don't want it to override the game that you're trying to make, but you also don't want to ignore them completely.
What is your general setup? I know you're 10 people, you're also working remotely.
Yeah.
So what is your project management system?
Obviously, we use Codecks for the actual production phase of things, but the way it starts out, we are 10 people. We are slowly growing, and so this is the largest we've been. It started out with 3-4 people, slowly growing over the last couple years. So that's actually been something that we've been growing and developing our own structure as well. Kind of going from when it's small, you can just have ideas and people start making them, but as you start to grow, it becomes much more structured. We need to have the game design ready to go so the artists can start making assets, so then the devs can start implementing that. So it's very much, we kind of keep that production cycle, and we use Notion a lot for the design documents, but then when it comes to Codecks, that's where everything lives as far as the production. So from the game design perspective, we meet with the art and dev leads, kind of go over our documents, and then they take that and turn it into cards and decks on Codecks. So they are creating the hero cards for each feature. They're creating all the sub cards, assigning it to all the different team members. And that's been something that's been really useful for us as we've been growing, to go from a couple artists and a couple devs to having a lead dev and a lead artist with people under them. So Codecks has been very much in that process of being able to take an idea, a task, and then how are we going to make that idea come to life? And that's been through your program, which has been incredibly helpful. Especially one thing we've loved is as we've been growing, so is the program. So that's been something that's been very helpful for us, is as we grow and need new processes, that's something where you guys have been very responsive and those new things have created. So that's been a big part of our process, is once all the tasks exist in Codecks, it can live there all the way up to the release, because we use the cards on Codecks to kind of create the change logs, because we might have been working on something for a few months and we can easily look at the card, review the comments that have been left on that, and we can easily say, oh yeah, this is that feature for the change log. So honestly, from the point where it leaves the design document, it lives in Codecks up until it's in the player's hands.
Also wonder, you guys are remote. I guess that adds a bit of complexity in terms of how you guys, I don't know, balance certain things. Can you share a bit like what are the non-negotiables maybe for your remote workflow? So things um, that absolutely need to happen, for instance, stay on track, or that you have the ability to sync on like what needs to be structured?
Absolutely. We are remote. We use Discord as kind of our office space. We do our 2 week sprints, and that's really what we use to keep things kind of in make sure everyone stays on track. And again, Codecks is great with that. We have the runs, I believe you guys call them on Codecks. And so with that, we have our meetings. We all pop on cameras, and we have our sprint planning meeting. And so we'll kind of break down the overview. Each team will then split off. So you have the devs, the artists, the design, and we'll do anything we need to do. And then, we kind of, everyone goes off to do their own tasks. So as a team, we'll usually meet at the beginning of the sprint. And then at the end of the sprint, we'll do a review. Everyone kind of shows off what they've been working on. And so those are our kind of structured meetings, which are definitely great to see everyone's face, especially when people are presenting things. It's great to be able to see everyone's reactions because we are remote and it can be easy to feel that disconnect. So we try to have a few structured things like that. We also meet with the other designers. Me and one of the designers will meet daily and just have a quick, even if it's just 10 minutes, we'll try to have that face-to-face meeting just to get that personalities, because we are scattered around the world even. And so most people are close to the same time zone. I'm not. I'm actually working in the middle of the night, but with being able to feel on Discord with the team still, it still feels like we're sitting together. And that's a lot of fun. Additionally, kind of outside of the office, we've for the last few years, once a year, we do meet up as a team, which is incredibly valuable. I think everything I've talked about talking digitally, that's fun. But that first time you meet someone in person there, it's something else that clicks, and important to have that connection. People aren't robots. Everyone's a person. So treating them like they are people and making sure we give as much of that human interaction, I think is important.
Yeah, I can totally resonate with that. I was like an avid remote advocate, especially during COVID time. I was like, okay, this is it. I will never go back from it. And then COVID kind of went away. And all of a sudden, we were also starting to go back to the office, and I realized how much I missed it. I love the flexibility at Codecks. We have the flexibility. We can work elsewhere if we want, or take time and not be in the office. But I just love spending time with my team because it's really different when you're in person. Like the way you brainstorm, the way you just crack jokes, like the ideas that you bounce between each other. And also just the fact that, I mean, it's easier to work with somebody that becomes your friend than with somebody who's a stranger doesn't care about you.
Absolutely. And we've tried, even like, some of us will play random games, multiplayer games in off hours as well, just to kind of, I agree, the feeling like you're a friend can help, even when, work it's sometimes work. Sometimes there'll be a feature. We're actually working on something right now that didn't quite land in the first pass, and we're doing another pass on it, which is part of game development. But it's a lot easier when you know each other, and it's just like, we have to try again, team, as opposed to just feeling like it's just a voice telling you do work again. I think that can be the difference between feeling motivated, like let's make it better, as opposed to just, I'm just writing code into a void. So I agree. Although I will also say, without the flexibility of remote work, I wouldn't be able to work with this team. So there's pros and cons all around. And I think the important thing is to try to find ways to circumvent that, like our annual meetups or just hanging out, having that freedom to have those meetings where it's not productive necessarily, but everyone feeling like they can show off and we can all look at their work. It gives you that team, like people actually feel like, oh, I want to make sure I have something cool to show everyone. So I think that changes the dynamic when you feel like a team that cares about each other and not just the output.
Do you guys then also meet? You mentioned you're meeting a designer daily, but with the rest of the team, do you have a weekly cadence of like a sync or just all hands or something like that?
So that we definitely, with the sprint planning, we have that all hand at the beginning of the sprint and the end of the sprint. So once a week we'll meet either on the Monday or the following Friday. So we definitely get that. And then it really depends. The two leads, they'll usually usually meet every day and sync up. The different members within a team often will. And it really depends on what stage we're at. So if we're at the beginning designing stage, I might be meeting with the leads and even the other developers a lot more because they'll have questions. But then once they get into their flow, it might be a little bit less. But then, of course, since I'm also on the back end, the quality control and community side, then I'm also checking and giving any feedback, so that I'm also communicating with them on the back end. So there's a lot of back and forth, and that can be, whether it's using the cards on Codecks to give notes, to give back and forths. That's honestly one of the best ways to do it, because there's so many tasks, and we can all be fractured a little bit in what we're working on. So that allows us to almost desync our syncs, so that we can, in some ways, we can be giving notes and still be communicating in a very fluid way. So it really depends on the moment. So I think between chatting on Discord and then being able to have the Codex and honestly, the way we use it, we have the hero cards, and we have different tags and groups and everything. So it's pretty organized, which makes things really easy to track and follow. So even I think that what could be quite confusing and frustrating, trying to track down previous conversations and everything, it becomes quite easy and fluid with a couple of good tools.
So you mentioned that you sync on each sprint or run, as we call it in Codecks.
Yes.
So is the duration of each sprint then just on a weekly cadence?
So we typically do 2-week sprints. It's not a hard rule. Kind of depends if we need something, like if there's some release coming or if there's a holiday or something, we might adjust. But for the most part, we try to keep kind of a 2-week pace on that. And really, the amount of work that's part of the negotiation with the developers and artists is we look at it and say, here's what we want to get done, and they can look at it and they'll say, all right, well, in this run, in this sprint, we can do this much, taking into consideration if someone's on vacation or if we're going to have a patch coming out, trying to figure out how much time might be allocated to different things. So that's really each run or each sprint, we figure out what's going to happen, and we don't kind of have an idea of what's going to happen or how many sprints might exist, but we don't try to plan sprints in the future. We like to see what, did we accomplish everything? Did we run into any problems? And then that way, each sprint, we can approach it fresh and say, where are we right now? And what do we need to get done? So that way we're able to adjust as needed and maybe put more resources in certain places if something's taking longer than we expected. So we try to kind of give little bite-sized pieces. Some of us, especially in the design, we're looking at that overarching long term, like what's the whole update? What's the next update? There are some of us that are looking much bigger picture, but a lot of the developers we found that can be overwhelming. And it's a lot easier for them to be working on, this is the piece you're doing. So obviously the leads, everyone needs to know how things connect, but there's also kind of a peace of mind in just saying, I've got these 10 tasks and I have to do that. What's going to happen next week? That's next week's problem. So there's a little bit of that where some of it is kind of breaking off just easy to digest pieces for some of the crew along the way.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Like, I definitely love in Codex the hand feature, because it just gives me, okay, these are the things you need to focus on. And because I work on strategy a lot, so sometimes I spend quite a lot of time strategizing and looking at the big picture. And then I'm like, okay, I spend way too much time on this. I actually need to do the granular. But I wonder how you guys actually deal with the bigger picture. So you have kind of this weekly, bi-weekly, more flexible sprint setup, but that has to be based on bigger goals. So how do you deal with like the overall scope?
So in the design aspect, so with the game we have right now, since it is early access, we are releasing updates every few months. We're doing big updates, and then we have our big 1.0 update coming. More content. So basically, what we've looked at is looking at, okay, what is our release schedule? What do we want each? What's the main feature for each big patch? So we definitely have that planned out, and we do a lot of that. That is where Notion comes in for us, and that's where we will have just a lot of the ideas or the documents or the details, a lot of the math in coming up. Like if we're adding a feature, I'll go through there and just put all here's the 10 products. We're making a business simulator. So it might be, here's the business opening hours, here's the products, here's what we'll sell them for and how much you'll buy them for, and just kind of running those numbers. So when the lead dev, when it comes time for this sprint, I can just say, this feature is related to this document. We'll have a meeting over it. And that way the developer can create the cards on Codecks based on that design document. So really it's not about, we're transparent with the team, but it's more about like, we on the top design team, we're looking at that long term, and as we get to each sprint, it's breaking off a piece of that. Since we are a small studio, we try to avoid hard release dates, and we look more for trying to make sure it's ready. And we've been since I'm also on the community manager side of things, that's something we've been very communicative and transparent with our players. We let them know where we are and when things change. If they have a problem with something, we communicate with them. And that has given us a lot of grace, so that if an update takes an extra few weeks, we just say, hey, we're listening to you. We're making it better. It's going to be there. And that allows them to, I think that's one benefit of being on the front and back end, is that I can be able to communicate with them and then also push that to the front and say, we're not ready for that update. So that's going to be pushed forward. So that's how we are really navigating the big picture. Is we want to make sure it is good and ready.
Yeah, that's been something that also others have been mentioning. Is like, when you set a deadline or a timeline, always give it a buffer, because it will never be exactly on the spot. I wonder, how do you deal with kind of setting timelines? I mean, you say you have some flexibility, which is great, and you communicate with the community, which gives you a bit of like maybe a de-stressor to needing to meet those timelines. But how do you make sure that you do reach a certain timeline and not exceed or not go overboard within kind of the time frame that you imagine things needing to happen?
One of the things we do is when we have an update ready, we also push it into an experimental branch first on Steam. So players, if they want to, can opt in and give us some more feedback, play it, kind of try to rip it apart and see if we can catch some of those early bugs that might exist, some edge cases of things. And that's really kind of become one of the determining factors. Is we've looked at that, where if we were to release updates too fast, just the amount of time that we would be trying to put into it and test and iterate on things, put it into experimental. If it's too fast, it's not a substantial update. And if it's too long, the players start to feel like, oh, is the game dead? What's happening? So it's definitely, I would say that drives a lot of what we found. Is we push out the update, patch it a couple times, and in about 3 months, we try to say, okay, the next update is in experimental, and we'll give it the time it needs to push that. So maybe 3 to 4 months sometime, and we'll have nice, fairly substantial updates each time. That seems to work well. Part of that's really just been trial and error, trying a few things, seeing if it's any longer, the players definitely start to complain. But, it's also, ideally, I would love to just be pushing out stuff constantly for the players, and every time there's a bug, just immediately push that out. But there's also that thing of, anytime you try to fix a bug, you potentially introduce 5 more. So there's definitely that thing of just trying to find that pace of, let's make sure there's enough content that we test the content, have some players give some feedback on it, and communicate with the players so they feel that we're still constantly moving forward. So that's really been the driving factor. And so for us, it kind of ends up being, let's get this update out in about 3 months. And so as we're setting up each update, that's something we talk with the developers. Okay, this feature, how long is that? And so we pick a few main features, and then we pick a few smaller things and say, okay, we can still fit in this much stuff. And then we just have a handful of quality of life. And then it's just like, if there's time, put as much of this in as you can. So that's, honestly, for us, it really comes down to, we aim for that goal, and then just kind of adjust. If a feature has to be pushed to the next update, we'll if we can throw in more quality of life, we will. If something needs a couple weeks, so we have a little bit of flexibility, but we definitely hit. There's milestones we need to hit, because you can also end up in feature creep, where you're just constantly adding more and more. And that's actually something we've been in early access for a little bit. We will be releasing an updated roadmap in the next couple weeks. I'm not sure when this video will be going out, but that is actually something that was something I kind of said we need to make sure it doesn't look like feature creep. We need to make sure we set up, this is the game, we're going to add content to it. But there's kind of that, some of those decisions really have a big part of it, because we could just keep doing more stuff for the next 10 years. But that's not a great, there has to be a point where you say, this is the game. The game is made.
I wonder how that decision is being made, because I assume, okay, Big Ambition has been in early access now for about 2 years, and you've been doing version updates since then, and you've been taking in quite a lot of community feedback, both like from them reporting bugs and also feature requests. So there's a lot to kind of filter through it. And I assume that the team also has opinions and wishes themselves. How do you make these decisions of like what should get into the milestone release, what should be disregarded, what should be a focal point, what should not be a focal point? What's your process?
Absolutely. With this game, like you said, it's been in early access for a couple years, which is, it's a bit long, but it's also been one of the things, players are kind of noting is it doesn't feel early access. We're adding features. And just a little history. Honestly, what happened was the creator of this game, his first game did well, and he thought, I'll make a second one. And he had an idea of the scope, had it a little bit bigger, and thought, this is what is a good idea of what to do. And the game just did way better than what he was thinking, which is a great problem to have. But right, that's pretty much what's been happening is, there's more players and they have more opinions, more play styles. They want more features. And to a certain while, it was just like, well, we shouldn't release this game now. It's definitely not where it could be, but we've gotten to a point where now we're looking at features and requests and we're saying, okay, some of those requests, that feels like a post-content free update. That's not necessarily that's not required for the core game to feel complete. So that's definitely been something we're looking at to say, at what point are we just taking everyone's ideas and just trying to cram as much in as we can? And at what point do we have to say, this is the scope of the game, and here's maybe some additional features that can come out? And that's actually been, that's what's going to be in this new roadmap that's coming out. But that's absolutely been a difficult decision and discussion, because with this many players, everyone wants something specific. There's something that they think this would make it perfect, and they all disagree on what that is. And some people would hate what the other people would love. And that's a point where we have to say, it's kind of been, oh, the sky's the limit to a point. And now we have to kind of say, well, here's this game. Part of that also comes into, like I mentioned, the original scope of the game was one person who thought he was going to be making the game all on his own, and now we're a team. And there's certain features that would be amazing, but within the original scope of, we're kind of looking at that and saying, okay, this is a bigger, more substantial thing. This isn't just a little update. This might be maybe a full DLC or maybe a sequel. And that's the sort of discussion that we are looking at right now. Is, well, we've made those decisions. It just hasn't been announced yet. But really just to kind of come out and say, this is Big Ambitions. This is where the game is. And anything beyond that is maybe some quality of life and cleanup. But yeah, that's definitely an important decision, is where is the scope of the game? Where does that end? Because otherwise, we could keep going forever. And you always risk, anytime you add a new feature, anytime you add something new, you risk alienating the game and what some people liked about it. So that's always a risk. You don't want to just keep tinkering at the game until you've broken it. So that's always a balance. But you also don't want to abandon it before it's ready. Absolutely. So that's where, when I joined the team, I started more on the quality assurance and community side, and then just started taking over more and more tasks of project management until, and now I'm in the lead design and project management side of things. And that's really been because of that process. As the company's grown, Jonas, our creator, has gone from just kind of doing it all to, now there's projects. And of course, there's future concepts that are being looked at, what's going to happen a year from now, 2 years from now, other projects. And that is now he has kind of taken over that. There's maybe some prototypes or concepts, if people are pitching ideas. So he's doing a lot of that, a lot of the, kind of looking at what is the company's future, while I have been running the game. And that's what he and I will do. Is we'll meet before every sprint. We'll discuss, we'll kind of do the design documents together and kind of make sure everything fits with what he's thinking. And then from there, I take that and run it to completion. He kind of checks in a few times throughout the process, and that allows him to have a much broader scope without if without that, if it definitely could become too fractured. It's harder to focus on the details and all the design documents and everything that needs to happen for the game while you're trying to do too much. And that's been part of the growth. Is now we have 3 people in the design team, and so me and Panos are creating those design documents to make sure that the artists and developers have well documented tasks ready to go, and he can still focus on making sure that we have something to do in a year.
I would love to talk a bit more about Codecks. So, can you walk us through your actual Codex setup a bit more in detail?
Certainly. So we have right now, Big Ambitions is our main game, BA, and so one great thing about Codecks is you can create multiple projects. So any other prototype or anything that's just kind of being conceptualized will also have a project for that, which is great. So it's easy to jump even between concepts or projects or prototypes because they're all quite organized. We'll have different updates here. We have our 6, 7, 8, 9, just different decks for each update. And as you see in here, we have 1,200, 600,000, quite a few cards within each deck. So we just are finishing up EA 9, which is just being released. One thing we do within the deck here is we will use the tags. We'll have the hero cards. We'll have art. We'll have a lot of cards. We introduced an entire new city, so there's a lot of art cards. Any art bugs we have, design cards, and then dev cards as well. So we use those tags, and then within that we assign each task to the correct artist or developer. So the great thing is, if you are a dev, you can come in here, you can look at the tasks, you can see an overview if you want, but then you can also just look at your hand, look at what's assigned to you, and see just the specific, here is task. Great thing, you can put in screenshots, you can put in whatever information, we can add links to the design document. And so they will use this task as kind of their basis of it, and they will start working on it. Of course, all the nice features of Codecks, you can start working on it if it's blocked, if it's ready for review, all that fun and stuff, which is great. So that's, but yeah. So we also have like a deck here for bugs, and within these bugs, we have a patch, coming out for our new things, our new update. So I'm able to create a little section here for that patch, or here's, for the artists and for the devs. I try to keep a handful of bugs. Like I mentioned earlier, we have our main tasks and smaller tasks in quality of life, but then there's also bugs. So sometimes a developer they've been working on a task and need a break, and they still want to be productive. So they'll come in here and jump on a quick bug task. I have some, maybe a general bug or a small quality of life. Here's some tricky ones if they're feeling like really working their brain or something like that. So what's great about Codecks is you can create any of these zones that you want. We can set different difficulties, so they can look at it and see within the tricky ones, this one, So it's great just to have all this organization. And honestly, most of this organization is set up by our leads. We kind of ask what their process is. So that's kind of why we have a different deck for each update, and we have the way we do those tags. And then of course we also have the hero cards. So in here, We have the hero cards and then all the sub cards that come in here. So really, Codecks, there's a lot of organization that it allows, and we're trying to use pretty much every piece of that, whether it's the hero cards and sub cards, whether it's the timeline here, setting things to different runs, looking at, we're already some of these tasks. When the lead dev and lead artist look at the overall task, they might assign certain things to certain runs. So all of these tools within Codecks are great, which allows us to organize. If the developers need a certain task from the artists first, they can say this task is blocked by this other task. So we can assign the artist task to run 3 and the developer task to run 4. So we try to use pretty much all of the features. Obviously, we have our hand. As the kind of overall lead, it's great. I love this hand section here because any card that's ready for review can all be listed here. Blocked cards, comments, review cards. Makes it very easy. As you mentioned earlier, I might be going from designing an update that we're going to be doing 6 months from now. And then I need to jump in and say, what needs reviewed right now? And this makes it super easy, whether it's these hand cards or even just these icons over here. It's really quick to see an overview of everything. It's like, honestly, I have Codecks up constantly. I'm always looking at these bubbles, and it's almost become a just second nature. I go through the social media to see if any players are commenting. I go through our Discord to see community messages. I look at Codecks to see if does anyone have any questions or blocked cards that I need to deal with. So it's a very convenient way to just kind of run through everything. As I might be working on 10 different tasks, and this makes it really easy to check in and make sure nothing's missed.
I remember you telling me when we spoke class that you also use the journeys quite a lot.
Yes, so journey creators. We have, and this is something, again, mostly our artists and lead artists and dev created these. What's great about this is, if we need a new piece of furniture, we're going to need, what side can the customers interact on? We need to be able to recolor it. We need values of prices, and we need to know what store it goes into. And we need to know, are there certain restrictions of which businesses it can be used on? And there's all these steps. And of course, when the artist created it, has to have certain colliders and certain values set. And so these journeys, what's great is we just say new piece of furniture, and it will create all of those cards. And that's an amazing thing. That way we don't have to remember or copy and paste or miss certain steps. We just say, we're making a new store. There's 5 pieces of furniture. We've got 10 products, and it will just create this entire layout from artist, design, developer, all with the proper tags and connections and restrictions. So that's a really useful feature, especially like in this current update that we're doing with the new businesses. We're using all of these. So what we'll do with these is, when the sprint starts and the artists and developers know we need that, they'll create all the cards, and then they'll move them into, like, up here into this backlog. So for instance, a calculator. This would be a new product. So all of these sub cards with model, implementation, design, add it to the store, add customization, add it to the help files. All of those are part of the journey. So if I click on another item, this spotlight, it'll have the same cards. So that's a great thing is every product that we're making for this update will have all of these sub cards and hero cards, and we don't have to create that every time. We just push a button and we've got it all. So that's definitely a very useful feature. So it automates a lot of the cool processes.
Then I have 2 more questions for you,
Perfect.
both a bit also bigger picture. So one is, what is maybe a mistake that you can think of in terms of production you did at the beginning when joining Hovgaard Games that if you go back, you'll tackle differently?
Personally or process-wise?
Process-wise. Could be also personal if it's connected to production side.
I would say honestly, one of the biggest things that we've started doing, especially in the last couple updates process, it has really just been a result of growing. So when I first joined, there was who's now the lead artist and lead developer and the creator and myself, and it was a small team, and you could really just say, "Here's the idea, let's make it." Now that things have become much more, you've got four artists and four developers and three artists, and they're looking for things. We end up in these situations where we found you can't wait until you're ready for the next update to start designing stuff. You really have to create that process and that flow. And honestly, prior to this, I was working in the animation industry in Los Angeles, and so I really took some inspiration from that workflow where you've got your writers and your storyboard artists. They work on an episode first, and then it gets handed off to your artists and the people creating the design, and then it goes on to the animation team. And there's that cycle. And so while the animators are working on something, the designers are working on the next episode, and the writers are working on the next episode. So you get this staggered production. And that was really one of the things that we found was really important, was to make sure we have the next update. We've already thought it through. We've already come up with the design documents. We need to have that done early. So when the artists come in and they start working on things, we're not still figuring things out and coming up with plans. That works when you're small. You can easily adapt. But when you've got a team and you've got people and we're planning things out on a much larger scale, that was one of the biggest things we needed, was that structure to say, okay, we need design documents done first. But when the artists, while I'm quality controlling an update, the artists are ready to start the next one. I need to have the design done ahead of time so that they can start working on the art, while just to make sure that we stay ahead. Because that was one of the biggest things we found, is as we grew, we found bottlenecks were starting to happen. And if you're waiting on me and five other people are waiting on me, well, I'm only one person, so now four people are going to be waiting. So that was honestly, I think, one of the biggest things that we found, is how to stagger our processes, how to make sure that certain people are taking responsibility for their stuff, and it's not that things weren't all coming onto one department or one person. The best way to have a problem is to be able to pull yourself back out of that hole and keep going forward.
I mean, that's part of building a game anyways. You stumble upon barriers all the time, and it's all about just figuring out how to get past them, I guess.
Absolutely. And that's super important, is that, yeah, like I said earlier, no amount of planning can make something execute perfectly the first time. And that's the thing, is how you iterate on that. How you take that idea, and then 3 or 4 steps later, now it's solid. Maybe, and that's a big part of it, is giving us that time to get to that iteration where it's a lot cleaner.
If someone watching this could steal one thing from how Hovgaard runs production that would maybe have the most immediate impact, what would you recommend?
Having someone who doesn't sleep is, honestly, I would say, one of the biggest, probably the biggest thing is, I was working, like I said, I was working in TV and film prior to this, had been working there for about 15 years. And the biggest thing I saw was when Jonas, the creator and our CEO, was making his first game, the way he was just by himself, but the way he treated the players, I could tell there was something that he cared, that he brought a passion, that he actually wanted to make something. And that was something I was really feeling. I was working for some studios that were, pretty big, and my name's in credits and in being broadcast internationally, and you're watching this, and it was all so corporate, so devoid of any life. Not the people working there, but just the end product, because it was so corporately driven. No one was having a good time toward the end. Just so life stealing to work there. And honestly, that was the biggest thing, is coming into this company and feeling like, no, we're making something. We're making a game. We want not only the players, but the team and everyone to feel like they matter. So sometimes that means doing that annual trip, where we're flying everyone to meet there, where we're taking that time, having those meetings, having those, times where we're treating each other like people, treating the community like people. That is an amount of effort that is, it takes, sometimes it can be easier just to put your head down and I'm just going to do this thing. But I think one of the biggest things that I think has increased our team in a lot of ways is just making sure everyone feels like they are a valuable member of the team. You are not a number. You are not just, a dev working on dev stuff. You are a person who has skills and talents and things they want to do and frustrations. And sometimes it's a matter of just listening to that frustration and saying, I hear that. That's, it's sometimes things suck, but, but being able to, I think, treat people like they are people, I think that's to me is one of the strongest things that made me really want to become part of this company and come into the position where I am right now, and say, let's do this for the next 20 years. Is I would rather be in a small 10-person team where everyone feels like they are important.
Thanks everybody for watching until the end. Now be a good human and support us by liking the video. And if you're a great human by any chance, then share it. That would help us a lot to reach more people that could benefit from all the awesome production lessons we're sharing.